All right, hey everyone. A few days ago, I responded to a comment about the Zeitgeist movement, and a person who follows the Zeitgeist movement asked me why it is that I think that money is necessary for economic calculation. And okay, so a little bit of a back history. Back during the whole Civil War, capitalism versus communism debate, there was an Austrian economist by the name of Ludwig von Mises, and he formulated an argument saying that socialism and communism can't work. It's actually destined to fail, and the reason why is because you can't do economic calculation without market forces, without privately owned enterprise. He turned out to be right. I understand completely that the Venus Project doesn't advocate communism, and it's not Marxism in the traditional sense. I'm not trying to insult anyone. I'm by no means a professional economist. I'm a civil engineer. I've just started learning Austrian economics as a hobby. I've been reading it for a few years. But so this book here, okay, is one that I would really recommend to Zeitgeisters or the Venus Project people. Human Action, okay. And so what I did here, let me sit up. What I did was I made some notes, okay, of the relevant parts of the book. So what I figured we'd do is we would just go through. Let me flip here to the relevant parts and just sort of read them and go over it. So this is called the scale of value, and you know what, I don't know if you can read. Yeah, you can't really read it, so you'll just see me read it, okay? This isn't made to be a professional video, but I think if you hear what it is that they're saying, you rewind it, and if you think about the arguments, if anything else, this will be a way for the Venus Project to understand a major obstacle and a major criticism from those who study Austrian economics and those who consider themselves libertarians. So, here it goes. The scale of value. Acting man chooses between various opportunities offered for choice. He prefers one alternative to others. It is customary to say that acting man has a scale of wants or values in his mind when he arranges his actions. On the basis of such a scale, he satisfies what is of higher value. In other words, his more urgent wants and leaves unsatisfied what is of lower value, what is a less urgent want. There is no objection to such a presentation of the state of affairs. However, one must not forget that the scale of values or wants manifests itself only in the reality of action. These scales have no independent existence apart from the actual behavior of individuals. The only source from which our knowledge concerning these scales is derived is the observation of a man's actions. Every action is always in perfect agreement with the scale of values or wants, because these scales are nothing but an instrument for the interpretation of a man's acting. And don't worry, I'll stop reading it a bit, and I'll try to explain this in a more colloquial language, but stick with me. I can't promise this will be interesting, but I promise that I would make this video to explain the viewpoint on why I think the Venus Project is doomed because of the calculation problem, and probably many people have heard about the calculation problem. Well, here it is from the man himself, von Mises. Ethical doctrines are intent upon establishing scales of value according to which man should act, but does not necessarily always act. They claim for themselves the vocation of telling right from wrong and advising man concerning what he should aim at as the supreme good. They are normative disciplines aiming at the cognition of what ought to be. They are not neutral with regard to facts. They judge them from the point of view of freely adopted standards. This is not the attitude of praxeology in economics. They are fully aware of the fact that the ultimate ends of human action are not open to examination from any absolute standard. Ultimate ends are ultimately given. They are purely subjective. They differ with various people and with the same people at various moments in their lives. Praxeology and economics deal with the means for the attainment of ends chosen by the acting individuals. They do not express any opinion with regard to such problems as whether or not sybaritism is better than asceticism. They apply to the means only one yardstick, whether or not they are suitable to attain the ends at which the acting individuals aim. The notions of abnormality and perversity therefore have no place in economics. It does not say that a man is perverse because he prefers the disagreeable, the detrimental, and the painful to the agreeable, the beneficial, and the pleasant. It says only that he is different from other people, that he likes what others detest, that he considers useful what others want to avoid, that he takes pleasure in enduring pain which others avoid because it hurts them. The polar notions, normal and perverse, can be used anthropologically for the distinction between those who behave as most people do and outsiders and atypical exceptions. They can be applied biologically for the distinction between those whose behavior preserves the vital forces and those whose behavior is self-destructive. They can be applied in an ethical sense for the distinction between those who behave correctly and those who act otherwise than they should. However, in the frame of a theoretical science of human action, there is no room for such a distinction. Any examination of ultimate ends turns out to be purely subjective and therefore arbitrary. Please stick with me, but here, it's starting to get to the crux. He tends to ramble, I know. Value is the importance that acting man attaches to ultimate ends. Only to ultimate ends is primary and original value assigned. Means are valued derivatively according to their serviceableness in contributing to the attainment of ultimate ends. Their valuation is derived from the valuation of the respective ends. They are important for man only as far as they make it possible for him to attain some ends. Value is not intrinsic. It is not in things. It is within us. It is the way in which man reacts to the conditions of his environment. Neither is value in words and in doctrines. It is reflected in human conduct. It is not what a man or groups of men say about value that counts, but how they act. The bombastic oratory of moralists and the inflated pompousness of party programs are significant as such, but they influence the course of human events only as far as they really determine the actions of men. Okay. This is probably going to be a series of videos, but basically what he's saying is, and I'm trying to summarize a very thick, very difficult to read book, but the premise that he's setting up, and by the time, this is on like page 96, so by the time you get to this page, part in the book, what he says is, among other things, the only reason why man acts is to take away some sort of perceived uneasiness. That the only reason why man does something or produces something is to better his existence or better his state, okay, however he perceives it. And so in order for you to do an economic calculation, you have to figure out what is valuable, and then you have to create a scale of values. And what he's pointing out correctly is that there is no objective measure of value, that ultimately value is derived from individuals making individual decisions that's based on their subjective opinions and thoughts and emotions at the time of the market activity. And it's this convergence of subjective actions that then creates an objective measure, which is price. How am I doing on time? I'm at 8:37. Okay, I'll do one more section. This is called the scale of needs, and yeah, you probably can't read that, but okay, so back to me. Notwithstanding all declarations to the contrary, the immense majority of men aim first of all at an improvement of the material conditions of well-being. They want more and better food, better homes and clothes, and 1,000 other amenities. They strive after abundance and health. Taking these goals as given, applied physiology tries to determine what means are best suited to provide as much satisfaction as possible. It distinguishes, from this point of view, between men's real needs and imaginary and spurious appetites. It teaches people how they should act and what they should aim at as a means. The importance of such doctrines is obvious. From his point of view, the physiologist is right in distinguishing between sensible action and action contrary to purpose. He is right in contrasting judicious methods of nourishment from unwise methods. He may condemn certain modes of behavior as absurd and opposed to real needs. However, such judgments are besides the point for a science dealing with the reality of human actions. Not what a man should do, but what he does counts for praxeology and economics. Hygiene may be right or wrong in calling alcohol and nicotine poisons, but economics must explain the prices of tobacco and liquor as they are, not as they would be under different conditions. So, once again, the algorithm or the computation of the supercomputer in the Venus Project, which, by the way, I've never seen the algorithm for. If anyone has one, please send it to me. I'd like to examine it. But humans are not completely logical, and part of the pricing structure and pricing mechanism is created by illogical or irrational decisions of individuals, right? And so a completely objective code or computer program might say, okay, well, nicotine and alcohol, there's no value there, they're actually poisons, so therefore I will not produce any, or I will not produce as much, or I don't know, it's difficult to come up with concrete examples, but you would have to somehow be able to tell the computer to think on an individual basis and to sometimes think illogically or irrationally. That's kind of what this paragraph is saying. There is no room left in the field of economics for a scale of needs different from the scale of values as reflected in man's actual behavior. Economics deals with real man, weak and subject to error as he is, not with ideal beings, omniscient and perfect as only gods could be, or in our current age, supercomputers. But yeah. Okay, so I'm going to end it and I'm going to go to the next section. I know that was dry. It is going to get better. I'm just going from beginning to end with only the pertinent parts. So I don't mean to come off as a dick as a know-it-all. I'm not a professional economist, but I do think that if people who advocate the Venus Project were to go through these arguments, one, I'd be really impressed if they could actually deal with these, because the socialists and communists could not. If you could, then perhaps you could convince some people. But okay, so I'll end this and then I'll make another video. Okay, so the next one is action as an exchange. It's on page 97 of this version. Action is an attempt to substitute a more satisfactory state of affairs for a less satisfactory one. We call such a willfully induced alteration an exchange. A less desirable condition is bartered for a more desirable. What gratifies less is abandoned in order to attain something that pleases more. That which is abandoned is called the price paid for the attainment of the end sought. The value of the price paid is called costs. Costs are equal to the value attached to the satisfaction which one must forego in order to attain the end aimed at. The difference between the value of the price paid, the cost incurred, and that of the goal attained is called gain or profit or net yield. Profit, in this primary sense, is purely subjective. It is an increase in the acting man's happiness. It is a physical phenomenon that can be neither measured nor weighed. That is a major, if you really think about that and what that entails, and if you agree that that's true, I see no way that a computer program can get around that statement. There is a more and a less in the removal of uneasiness felt, but how much one's satisfaction surpasses another can only be felt. It cannot be established and determined in an objective way. A judgment of value does not measure, it arranges in a scale of degrees, it grades, it is expressive of an order of preference and sequence, but not expressive of measure and weight. Only the ordinal numbers can be applied to it, but not the cardinal numbers. It is vain to speak of any calculation of values. Calculation is possible only with cardinal numbers. The difference between the valuation of two states of affairs is entirely psychical and personal. It is not open to any projection into the external world. It can be sensed only by the individual. It cannot be communicated or imparted to any fellow man. It is an intensive magnitude. Physiology and psychology have developed various methods by means of which they pretend to have attained a substitute for the unfeasible measurement of intensive magnitudes. There is no need for economics to enter into an examination of these rather questionable makeshifts. Their supporters themselves realize that they are not applicable to value judgments, but even if they were, they would not have any bearing on economic problems, for economics deals For economics, it deals with actions as such and not with the physical facts that result in definite actions. It happens again and again that an action does not attain the end sought. Sometimes the result, although inferior to the end aimed at, is still an improvement when compared with the previous state of affairs. Then there is still a profit, although a smaller one than that expected, but it can happen that the action produces a state of affairs less desirable than the previous state it was intended to alter. Then the difference between the valuation of the result and the cost incurred is called loss. So again, without pricing mechanisms, by falsely saying that the reason why we have all these problems, which the Venus Project correctly points out as being the existence of money in general, not just thieving fiat, but all money in general. That's false logic, by the way. Without that pricing structure, you wouldn't be able to figure out what is a profit and what is a loss. Resources are scarce. A lot of these project people will try to say, oh, well, when we've completely mechanized everything and there's no longer a scarcity of resources, then, this won't be a problem. Well, the only way we're going to get there is by using the free market, not by using central planning and a computer. Until that happens, the reality is resources are scarce. So, okay, so that was the first part. Okay, now page 143 is the next bit here. Human cooperation. Okay, so this starts talking about individualism versus collectivism. The Venus Project is a collectivist ideology. It is the thought that everyone would substitute their individual will and their individual choice and their individual sovereignty and make it subordinate to a supercomputer. If I understand correctly, that is collectivist ideology. So society is considered action. It's cooperation. Society is the outcome of conscious and purposeful behavior. This does not mean that individuals have concluded contracts by virtue of which they have founded human society. The actions which have brought about social cooperation and daily bring it about anew do not aim at anything else than cooperation with coadjuvancy, I don't know what that word is, with others for the attainment of definite singular ends. The total complex of the mutual relations created by such concerted actions is called society. It substitutes collaboration for the, at least conceivable, isolated life of individuals. Society's division of labor and combination of labor. In his capacity as an acting animal, man becomes a social animal. Individual man is born into a socially organized environment. In this sense alone, we may accept the saying that society is, logically or historically, antecedent to the individual. In every other sense, this dictum is either empty or nonsensical. The individual lives and acts within society, but society is nothing but the combination of individuals for cooperative effort. It exists nowhere else than in the actions of individual men. It is a delusion to search for it outside the actions of individuals. That's precisely what the Venus Project means to do. It means to substitute the actions of individuals for the actions of a omniscient or nearly omniscient supercomputer and its productive, robots. I mean, to speak of a society's autonomous and independent existence of its life, its soul, and its actions is a metaphor which can easily lead to crass errors. 145 is the next big. Okay, a critique of the holistic and metaphysical view of society. According to the doctrines of universalism, conceptual realism, holism, collectivism, that's you, and some representatives of Gestalt psychologic, society is an entity living its own life, independent of and separate from the lives of the various individuals, acting on its own behalf and aiming at its own ends, which are different from the ends sought by the individuals. Then, of course, an antagonism between the aims of society and those of its members can emerge. In order to safeguard the flowering and further development of society, it becomes necessary to master the selfishness of the individuals and to compel them to sacrifice their egoistic designs to the benefit of society. That's precisely what I hear in the TVP stuff. At this point, all these holistic doctrines are bound to abandon the secular methods of human science and logical reasoning and to shift to theological or metaphysical professions of faith. Okay, 146. And I know that, like, you guys are trying to use the scientific method, you're trying to sound logical and everything, but I would say it's not inaccurate to say that it is a profession of faith to try to jump to a organization of society that's never even been tried and to abandon the prime mechanism itself. That is a huge leap of faith. Not that I'm saying that you shouldn't be able to try. Go ahead, knock yourself out. But I'm just saying it's not going to work. The essential problem of all varieties of universalistic, collectivistic, and holistic social philosophy is, by what mark do I recognize the true law and the legitimate authority? Each party is prepared to make its own tenets prevail, but as logical argumentation cannot decide between various dissenting creeds, there is no means left for the settlement of such disputes other than armed conflict. The non-rationalist, non-utilitarian, and non-liberal social doctrines, he means classical liberal, by the way, not modern liberal, which is a bunch of fascist dickheads, and non-liberal social doctrines must beget wars and civil wars until one of the adversaries is annihilated or subdued. So collectivism is always going to lead to war and armed conflict. I know that people in the Venus Project say that in order for it to work, everyone would have to participate in it, but they're not going to use force to make everyone join. I get the feeling that if 90% of the people, just as an example, were willing to do it, and the other 10% didn't, and that started causing problems to the 90%, collective history would in my opinion, suggest that the collectivist mentality would then start to use force. But that is conjecture. So no method of economic calculation is possible other than one based on money prices as determined by the market. How am I doing on time? 8:47. Yeah. Let's see, 162. And now, okay, the problem of economic calculation, page 207. The problem of economic calculation. Acting man uses knowledge provided by the natural sciences for the elaboration of technology, the applied science of action possible in the field of external events. Technology shows what could be achieved if one wanted to achieve it, and how it could be achieved provided people were prepared to employ the means indicated. With the progress of the natural sciences, technology progressed too. Many would prefer to say that the desire to improve technological methods prompted the progress of the natural sciences. The quantification of the natural sciences made technology quantitative. Modern technology is essentially the applied art of quantitative production of the outcome of possible action. One calculates with a reasonable degree of precision the outcome of planned actions, and one calculates in order to arrange an action in such a way that a definite result emerges. However, the mere information conveyed by technology would suffice by the performance of calculation only if all means of production, both material and human, could be perfectly substituted for one another according to definite ratios, or if they were all absolutely specific. Okay, so far, people from the Venus Project would be like, okay, well, we can do that, right? In the former case, all means of production would be fit, although according to different ratios for the attainment of all ends, whatever. Things would be as if only one kind of means, one kind of economic goods of a higher order existed. In the latter case, each means could be employed for the attainment of one end only. One would attach to each group of complementary factors of production the value attached to the respective good of the first order. Here again we disregard provisionally the modifications brought about by the time factor. Okay, don't worry about the time factor thing, that's a different part of the book. Neither of these two conditions is present in the universe in which man acts. The means can only be substituted for one another within narrow limits. They are more or less specific means for the attainment of various ends. But on the other hand, most means are not absolutely specific. Most of them are fit for various purposes. The facts that there are different classes of means, that most of the means are better suited for the realization of some ends, less suited for the attainment of some ends, for some other ends, and absolutely useless for the production of a third group of ends, and that therefore the various means allow for various uses, set men the tasks of collecting them to those employments in which they can render the best service. Here computation in kind as applied by technology is of no avail. Technology operates with countable and measurable quantities of external things and effects. It knows causal relations between them, but it is foreign to their relevance to human wants and desires. Its field is that of objective use value only. It judges all problems from the disinterested point of view of a neutral observer of physical, chemical, and biological events. For the notion of subjective use value, for the specifically human angle, and for the dilemmas of acting man, there is no room in the teachings of technology. It ignores the economic problem. To employ the available means in such a way that no want more urgently felt should remain unsatisfied because the means suitable for its attainment were employed, wasted, for the attainment of a want less urgently felt. For the solution of such problems, technology and its methods of counting and measuring are unfit. Technology tells how a given end could be attained by the employment of various means which can be used together in various combinations, or how various available means could be employed for certain purposes, but it is at a loss to tell man which procedures he should choose out of the infinite variety of imaginable and possible modes of production. What acting man wants to know is how he must employ the available means for the best possible, the most economic removal of felt uneasiness, but technology provides him with nothing more than statements about causal relations between external things. It tells, for example, 7 alpha plus 3 beta plus 5 Charlie plus add x times n liable to bring about a certain number of product. But although it knows the value attached by acting man to the various goods of the first order, it cannot decide whether this precept or any other out of the infinite multitude of similarly constructed precepts best serves the attainment of the ends sought by acting man. Okay, I'm going to make another video. I'm getting kind of long. Okay, last part. The art of engineering can establish how a bridge must be built in order to span a river at a given point and to carry definite loads, but it cannot answer the question whether or not the construction of such a bridge would withdraw material factors of production and labor from an employment in which they could satisfy needs more urgently felt. It cannot tell whether or not the bridge should be built at all, where it should be built, what capacity for bearing burdens it should have, and which of the many possibilities for its construction should be chosen. Technological computation can establish relations between various classes of means only to the extent that they can be substituted for one another in the attempt to attain a definite goal. But action is bound to discover relations among all means, however dissimilar they may be, without any regard to the question whether or not they can replace one another in performing the same services. Technology and the considerations derived from it would be of little use for acting man if it were impossible to introduce into their schemes the money prices of goods and services. The projects and designs of engineers would be purely academic if they could not compare input and output on a common basis. The lofty theorist in the seclusion of his laboratory does not bother about such trifling things. What he is searching for is causal relations between various elements of the universe, but the practical man, eager to improve human conditions by removing uneasiness as far as possible, must know whether, under given conditions, what he is planning is the best method or even a method to make people less uneasy. He must know whether what he wants to achieve will be an improvement when compared with the present state of affairs and with the advantages to be expected from the execution of other technically realizable projects which cannot be put into execution if the project he has in mind absorbs the available means. Such comparisons can only be made by the use of money prices. Thus, money becomes the vehicle of economic calculation. This is not a separate function of money. Money is the universally used medium of exchange, nothing else, only because money is the common medium of exchange, because most goods and services can be sold and bought on the market against money, and only as far as this is the case can men use money prices in reckoning. The exchange ratios between money and the various goods and services as established on the market of the past and is expected to be established on the market of the future are the mental tools of economic planning. Where there are no money prices, there are no such things as economic quantities. There are only various quantitative relations between various causes and effects in the external world. There is no means for man to find out what kind of action would best serve his endeavors to remove uneasiness as far as possible. There is no need to dwell upon this primitive condition of the household economy of self-sufficient farmers. Okay, well, he starts rambling off again. So, I know it was long. I apologize if that was dry, but that is the meat and potatoes of, I think, the core argument that must be met. And I'm sorry, it's called the calculation problem. According to Austrian economics, it's not solvable. I don't care how powerful a supercomputer it is. A supercomputer cannot assign value because value is not objective. It's subjective. So, yeah, there it is. I know that this was intended for the one particular guy. I'm just going to post this for public in case any random people want to listen to this. I hope I didn't bore you too much. I'm open to conversation. I know that this stuff is not easy to understand. Ludwig von Mises tended to explain things in a very academic, I think unnecessarily so academic fashion, but there it is. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks. Bye.